But my grandfather and I loved smelling things together, and he not only gave me my first little bit of schnapps, which was, basically, like whiskey when I was a very little girl, tiny little bit, like thimbleful, but we would smell perfume together as like basically an eccentric kind of activity, but something that we did together. And he was the chief taster and smeller for my grandmother, and I guess I mimicked him, who basically always smelled everything before he ate it. And not really realizing it, I was developing my palate through my grandfather.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I speak with fascinating people from all over the world, from every walk of life, who will inspire you to live with zest. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, and my mission is to bring you optimism about aging and help you make full use of the new opportunities that only come at this stage of life. To find out more about the podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my weekly email newsletter, The Insider, where you will get fun and quirky tidbits about the show and my exploits, including when I went python hunting in Florida and my participation in the National Senior Games. And if you love the podcast, I'd be grateful if you shared it with your friends. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on the show. Find out more at judybanker.com. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler. Well, you may not believe this, but there might be a bunch of added chemicals to the wine you're drinking, possibly even sawdust. Why should you care? Well, according to acclaimed wine expert Alice Feiring, you are missing out on the flavor and experience of drinking real wine. Controversial and feisty, Alice Feiring was proclaimed the queen of natural wines by the Financial Times, and among her many writing awards is the coveted James Beard Award for wine journalism. And when she's not writing, she's a frequent lecturer and panelist on all things wine, and her career has been focused on promoting and appreciating natural wines all over the world. Welcome to the show, Alice.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited. I read your latest book and I was so taken by it for many, many reasons. And I have to admit, I am not a wine drinker. It doesn't really agree with my system, but I grew up in a European household and wine was important. I was just kind of on the, the outskirts of that. You were raised as a Jewish girl drinking Manischewitz, which is, for people who have never tasted it, sort of tastes like cough syrup. Would you agree with that estimation?
I go with a liquefied cherry cough drop kind of
yeah, that's
thing. Good. Yeah.
That's good. So how does a girl who's brought up and whose mom still, as you became an expert, was sort of trying to mix up some Manischewitz in your
right.
wine. How? Tell me about the progression as a young child learning about fine taste.
You're right. Fine taste. Well, that's it. One can talk about wine, or one can talk about just the explosion that happened when I realized a whole other world of food. But I think the path to both of those is basically through my nose. And I was brought up in an Orthodox Jewish household, very, very typical shtetl food, Eastern European shtetl kind of food. The only fresh vegetable might have been a potato that got baked, and then salad. But my grandfather and I loved smelling things together, and he not only gave me my first little bit of schnapps, which was, basically, like whiskey when I was a very little girl, tiny little bit, like thimbleful. But we would smell perfume together as like basically an eccentric kind of activity, but something that we did together. And he was the chief taster and smeller for my grandmother. And I guess I mimicked him, who basically always smelled everything before he ate it. And not really realizing it, I was developing my palate through my grandfather.
Do you think he had special physiology that, gave him particularly fine smelling apparatus?
Well, he did have a very, very prodigious nose. But that for sure, mine is not quite as big. Very, very noble. My grandfather had a very beautiful, noble nose. But when people always ask me, what do I smell and taste in a wine? I would historically always say, what I think is in it is not really important. It's really what you experience. We all experience the world of the senses in a very different way. But when I lost my sense of smell and taste during COVID last year, I realized that I have not been giving myself enough credit, or my grandfather. I think that we just do experience a heightened sense of smell than most people. I think most people who find their way, not everybody, but most people who find their way in this field are here because they basically see things in such vivid technicolor.
It's so interesting that you use that, because as I was reading, and someone who loves using words and loves the English language, I thought, you have got to know about some really interesting adjectives, because your descriptions of these wines, I was thinking, if you didn't have such a vocabulary and such a sensitivity to language, I was wondering how you would be describing some of these wines.
Well, I do try to go out of my way not to necessarily describe the flavor so much. Of course, people want to know the flavors of a wine, whether they'd be attracted to it. But so much of wine is not just about the flavor, but the emotional impact and liveliness. So I try not to shackle myself to the typical jammy, raspberry, plum, blah, 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 because basically that's really not why somebody is picking up a bottle of wine in the wine shop, because it's like a raspberry patch. That's not why they're going to do it.
Can I read something from your book? Would that be okay? Because
yes.
It's so lovely and really speaks. It's a great example. That brutal landscape produced a wine so delicious that it was life affirming, created from adversity, a blood orange-like acidity and the silkiness of the finest fabric. One sip transported me to that sight. Each real bottle of wine can encapsulate its place and culture. Wine had that power. And you're talking about not just like it tastes like this, it tastes like that, but the full body experience of drinking wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so, I always, I'm shocked to hear my words read back to me, but it actually is pretty much of what, it was very illustrative of what I was talking about. A couple of things about wine are important to know. The acidity is important because some people really like high acid, like some people like high acid foods, or they don't. So that's important. And the texture, because those are the sensual parts of it. But also, I really believe that wine has this emotional impact. Some are just wine. Something like an everyday wine is just like an everyday wine. It's fine. But this book, when I did talk about wine, because it's mostly a book about life, but when I did talk about wine, I wanted it to be something that was extraordinary.
It's such an important part of your life.
Yes, I never wanted to be a wine writer, though, but it is.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. You may have noticed that Zestful Aging Podcast does not run a lot of ads. That's because I'm just not willing to endorse products that I don't have total confidence in and that I don't use myself. So it really means something when I tell you that after I interviewed Dr. Bill Rawls on cellular health, read his books, and learned about his high standards for quality control, I was sold. I placed an order for Vital Plant supplements immediately. I encourage you to check out both of my interviews with Dr. Bill Rawls and hop on over to vitalplan.com. If you enter Zestful15, they will give you a 15% off of your first order. I'm really excited for you to try these products. I think you'll be very impressed. Now, back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about your career and you found yourself in a place that probably you didn't plan, and that was calling out the wine industry.
Yes. If there was a whistleblower, I suppose I could be that person, yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember that decision, like knowing just that time when you said they're putting junk in wine and sawdust sometimes, and I just can't even bear that? Do you remember how you worked that through, that you were going to speak out?
Right. Well, I did speak out very loudly and notably in the New York Times in the business section when I wrote a story in 2001 for Better or for Worse, Winemakers Go High Tech. And that was, right now, 21 years later, I'm known for first person work. And back then I was doing most of my pieces as reported pieces. And I did this like any other reported piece for the New York Times. But not almost like, hey, do you know what's going on? And it was interesting. I hadn't really become outraged about it, more like, wow, this is amazing. And I was not really prepared for the blowback that I got for it. And it was really the blowback when I realized how sensitive it was. And, I got death threats, etc., etc. People took this very, seriously, that I realized that I had, basically stumbled into into a world that really needed more exposure. So that certainly was the moment. But a more innocent moment was, realizing, okay, fine. There are all these things in wine that, do not align with the way I eat at all. So philosophically, okay, I don't want to drink those wines. But at the same time, I was realizing that wine was not what it had been in the late 70s and early 80s when I was drinking it. It had changed. I didn't like a lot of the wines I was drinking, and what the hell was going on? Mm-hmm. And that was when my outrage met up with my philosophical bent. Mm-hmm. And then it took a few years for me to get up the courage it took about 3 more years for me to get the courage to write my first book that was basically about that.
Mm-hmm. About the natural wine movement.
Well, it was about the way technology was changing the world of wine and basically robbing us of the traditional wines of the world. And placing it with technological wines and telling people, no, those are good wines. And when I'm like, they're not so good.
Mm-hmm. Telling the truth.
Right.
And, it's interesting because in these kind of situations, not that we've all had this kind of situation, but like when you speak out, you kind of know who your friends are, right? To see who will stand by you, even they may or may not understand the issue. Were you surprised at who stood up for you and supported you? Were there families or wineries that said, yay, Alice is saying what we've been wanting everyone to know?
Well, my support started mostly in France. Mm-hmm. I was really not supported in the United States. There were some people, not wineries, because back in the early aughts, there were very, very few people who worked traditionally and naturally. There was one, Paul Draper of Ridge Vineyards, who was a big supporter of mine. Ridge is a very, very famous California winery, and Paul made some very beautiful wines, and he really believed in transparency. So that was notable. But I almost felt I was, like persona non grata in California. So it took a while. I mean, there were some people, but a lot of publicists obviously started to stay away from me because I was not good for their client. In fact, sometimes when publicists reached out to me for their client, I'm thinking, do you know who I am? Are you sure you want to talk to me? But it was mostly in Europe. The Europeans really got behind me. First, the French, then the Italians, and the Spanish, and then the new winemakers of California got behind me. Yeah.
I see. Oh, that must have felt so validating.
Finally, yeah.
Finally. I'm wondering, you've traveled so much, and you the way you describe these towns is just, you have such a familiarity with some of these families, the vineyards and all. Have you considered moving to France?
It's my morning pre-coffee exercise. Where am I going to go? And I think about it all the time, and probably within the next few years, I will test the waters by moving for 6 months. And I think that it has to be France. I always think where in Europe or Eurasia, the country of Georgia is very appealing for me for a move, but it is just so far away. I'm not sure I could possibly do that. The 11-hour flight is just a bit much. But yeah, so France and Paris is the obvious choice, though it'd be a lot cheaper if I moved someplace like Burgundy. Yeah, finally, learn French to, far better than I can speak now. I think it's about time. If my brain can still do it. Yeah.
I was interested, as someone who really loves the natural world, I was really interested in hearing your description of the different soils and the minerals, even in the same, it's not county, it's province or, correct.
Yeah,
correct
region,
me.
Town,
That you would say, oh, we knew this one was from the north or this one was from the south, because you could taste this, like it tasted more granite. There was a word in particular, flinty.
I think for granite, I always think of more angular, more angularity or verticality, to use a real wine term. Like, it's kind of geeky. A lot of times when you're being extremely geeky about wine, you'll say, well, this wine has a verticality or a horizontal quality, which actually makes sense. You can feel the wine going up and down and sort of crystallize, as opposed to lush and just going, just washing over your palate.
I see. Yes.
But yes, there are some things that you can actually get. But
yeah, that was very interesting to me, is that it's all about the soil.
Very much so.
And I'm wondering about the effects of global warming. What have you started to see?
Oh, so much. Actually, I just saw a picture on Instagram of a grapevine weeping. So actually, after you do your winter pruning, it should put the grapevine dormant until it starts warming up. And the first sign of a vine waking up is it's weeping, the sap coming out. And I just, when I saw that this morning, I said, oh my God, it's January 3rd, even in the south of France, come on. So it is completely wreaking havoc with the wine world. So, which is, not only are we getting earlier and earlier harvests, but because of the unpredictability of whether grapevines are going to flower, and then they're having to deal with frosts or hail at really horrible parts of their, their life cycle because of hurricanes. Bird patterns are being disrupted. That means birds may swoop down on your winery and eat all the fruit in one 20-minute. So it is just completely havoc. You might notice that alcohol levels are rising and rising, so where 15% is very typical, which actually makes for a very heavy, unpalatable wine. So there are ways that people are trying to get around it with using of hybrids, or at least with the alcohol levels, getting away from mono variety. So no more 100% Cabernet or Pinot Noir, but sort of blending in some white grapes that have higher acidity. So there are some ways that people are trying to counteract it, but it is an extremely difficult time. And it's kind of like the harbinger of things to come. Of course, the same thing that's happening to grapevines are happening to peach trees, to tomatoes, like et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I noticed. I'm in upstate New York, and I noticed some trees were budding out in December, and I just think they're so confused.
Totally confused. It is kind of terrifying.
You speak to the growers about this in France?
Yes, very much. Most of the problem started right after 2003. 2003 was, at that point, the hottest summer on record in France. That was the one, and thousands of people died because of the heat. And alcohol levels zoomed. But you speak to the growers, there was life before 2003, and then after 2003, it was total havoc. It was as if 2003 broke the system, which is just fascinating. And I don't hear other people talking about this, but when you look at the statistics, it all lines up.
And I imagine, it's a guess, a small country like France isn't producing the kind of, greenhouse gases, and they're really paying a price.
Very much so.
Do you hear a lot of resentment towards the States? Are you met with any resentment being from the U.S.?
It really depends on who our president is.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I can't tell you when Obama was elected, all of a sudden, it was like, welcome back, America.
Oh, goodness gracious.
But, so yes. And then there was after Obama, then there was nothing but sympathy. But,
nothing but sympathy. I was in Istanbul many years ago, before a lot of the stuff's going on now, and I just would introduce myself and said, I didn't vote for him. That's how I would introduce myself.
Well, I remember back the first time that I went to Europe was 1977, and I went with my Kelty backpack, and I went alone. And I was, I told everybody I was Canadian. That's what you did back then.
Yes. Isn't that just says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking about getting a Canadian, the flag t-shirt when I went to Turkey, thinking that might be helpful.
Right.
Oh, so sad. Yeah. So that is going on. How else do you see? I mean, you've done everything you can possibly do, it seems, winning the James Beard Award for wine journalism. I understand that that's quite a beautiful ceremony, that you get treated very well.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, actually, the journalism awards are separated from the other awards, but so it doesn't quite have the pomp and circumstance of the food awards, which is, black tie and, but it's a small dinner. It's not so small. It's a dinner, and it's just exciting. There's so few outlets for food and wine writing to be recognized. There's a lot for other outlets. But, you go up, you get this big gold medal.
I love it.
It's just, we all need recognition. And so, so it was kind of a thrill that this story that was political, actually, and the James Beard Awards back in those days particularly stayed away from controversial topics, that this won an award just felt extremely special.
And, throughout the book, you talk about how your mom never really understood why you're doing what you do, and still scratching her head about that. Did she have comments about this award? I mean, I'm sure she knew as a New Yorker what a big deal this was too.
Let me just, no, she didn't. No, I'm trying to think about one time. Well, of course, she didn't appreciate it as much as when the article came out in the Times. Whenever something comes out in the Times, she was always very proud of me. But she didn't really understand what this Michigas was about a medal and big deal. Did it come with money? No, it didn't come with money. Okay, fine. Then what kind of award is it?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Up to the end.
Right up to the end. So yes, I have that kind of mother. This is what you do for a living? You write about wine?
No, you were, how shall I say, an independent thinker from early on.
I suppose, yes, this is true. A lone wolf. They sort of, like lone wolves have suddenly gotten a bad connotation. But, I was always, ever since I was a little girl, I was just always running away from crowds. So I guess that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I didn't think anybody would notice. So I getting into wine writing was an accident. It was just, I was writing and then it happened to be wine writing. And with my books, I really didn't think anybody would notice. So that was really a big surprise.
Wow. How interesting. Yeah. Well, I can imagine when it wasn't, celebrated in the family, it'd be confusing, to say, wait, the world is interested.
Right. But I think it's also any first generation, like who does something, like it's not like my father was a lawyer, my mother, until the divorce, like was a housewife, but there was nobody in my family who was in the arts. So it's very hard to pave that path when there's no one leading the way for you.
Did you have friends? I mean, I know you're a big reader and you like going to the bookstores, and that's actually another story.
That's another story, right?
That's
the bookstore,
another
right?
story. But did you find your tribe growing up as sounds like pretty precocious, bright young girls?
Yeah. Always had friends. And my tribe, I went to yeshiva for 12 years. And so, I could say that, no, I did not have my tribe. I was, I had this good friend and that good friend, but I never really belonged in that world and couldn't wait to be out of that world.
Right.
So in that way, no. I mean, those were all very good little those very good girls. I was not such a good girl. So, I was a bit of a rebel.
Yeah, and finding your way after a lot of family disruption and that.
Right. I did find a tribe later through dancing, through something that I call, Morris dancing or English country dancing and contra dancing, and that was probably the first time that I felt in a community.
Do you feel like, now your group are at least wine appreciators? Are most people in your close circle wine appreciators, if that's a word?
Yes. Yes. And even if they're not, they certainly appreciate what I pour for them. So, I've turned quite a few people into being a little bit more serious about wine than they really wanted to be. But I also am that person who will get text, wine list, help Alice, what shall I drink?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah. For those of us who feel they're missing out on a whole world of pleasure and learning and all of this, and perhaps even travel, where might one start? Let's just take me, for example,
Okay.
who appreciates a lot of fine things, fine yarn when I knit, fine food, not fancy food necessarily, but very fresh. And I really appreciate eating well, as you do. So quality, not necessarily complicated. Where do you even start?
well, I think, isn't there a wool festival or yarn festival in Vermont?
Well, they're all over.
Well-
One of the biggest ones in New York State.
Yeah, I had recently heard about one in Vermont. And one of the things that I find fascinating about wool, and I'm not a knitter, but I know somebody, this is actually Eric Asimov's wife. He's the chief wine critic of the New York Times. Deborah is a knitter, and she talks about being able to tell by the feel of the yarn where it's from. So about the terroir of the yarn, which I find fascinating as a wine person. So I would combine all those three and become a wool tourist to places that have really great wine and food. So, and I think that's a wonderful way in. I don't know how to else. So Vermont for sure. I think there should be one in Sicily with all the sheep there. But certainly Sicily is great for wine and food, and yeah.
So you're saying combining your loves, or saying
Combine the loves. Combining the loves.
What a great idea.
Because I think that the idea of wool tourism is a great one. And
well, it's interesting because in Europe, when I would travel, I said, I have to find, well, I was in Scotland. I'm like, I have to find the best yarn store. And I walked and I got lost, and it was this teeny little store, and the prices were crazy. Well, yeah, it's Europe, right? I mean, I'm an American, and I'm always looking for value, which is it's a problematic probably. But what I found, just for the yarnies out there, is the best wool places, and one's in Northampton, Massachusetts. And I interviewed the owner, actually, are in the U.S., strangely. But those
kind of things, like when you have that passion about something, and you use that as to way to map out where you go, then all of a sudden there are all these discoveries along the way on that journey.
What a wonderful idea. And I know that you're a fan of Vermont wines, not so much Long Island wines, apparently.
Not so much Long Island, though I was tasting some Long Island yesterday that were pretty. So, I mean, I understand that. I think partly my issue with Long Island is the fact that I was raised on Long Island. So.
I see. It was hard to overcome that. It's interesting with Vermont, and I'm sure you know much more about this, but my husband is a big microbrew guy, and it's the water, right? I mean, the beers that are being made are the places where there's good water. Is that true also with wine, or that's a totally different?
Yeah, that would be different. You basically need places that has some adequate water to go along with the soil type. So, for example, on Santorini, they usually have less than 2 inches a year, but yet they don't have to irrigate. So, but that's partly because of the soil, the special soil, where you don't want too much water and you don't want too little water. And right now, for the most part, we're in a situation of too little water. But the actual access to delicious water doesn't really affect the grape.
I see, because it certainly does for the beer.
Absolutely.
There were just huge floods in California. Are you hearing much from the wineries? Are they suffering?
I have not heard. The big floods were mostly in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and actually I know some people making wine up there, and I really should have reached out, but I don't. Grapevines at this this time of year, they're very resilient. They're not letting go of their soils. They're not being washed away.
Okay, well that's good to know. I'm just wondering if there's anything you'd like to add before we wrap up about this career of yours and how you fell into it by accident and then really made it your own. For those of the women that are listening, they're maybe thinking about what their second careers might be. How do we explore where our passions might lie?
Well, that's interesting because, second career, one could think that this has been like a 25 to 30 year detour for me. And the last, the book, To Fall in Love, Drink This, was I wanted it to be my bridge because it is a memoir. And I wanted it to be my bridge out of writing about wine and just to go back to writing. And one could say maybe that second career. I don't know if the world will let me, and I don't know whether I have it in me to really finish the novel I'm working on. But even changing genres would be second career. But it's hard. The world views you as one thing, and it is very difficult to get people to see you in a different light sometimes. So I don't have any advice about that. If we were doing this with call-ins, I think that it would be an amazing question to have people call in and say, how do you handle that? How did you handle that? Changing the little box that the world put you in. How do you get out of that one? It's
and the box that you're in is a pretty big box. I mean, you're internationally known for your expertise.
But that's one good reason to move to France for a while. I think that travel is usually, I think for so many people, I won't say almost everybody, but for so many people, it is a way to all of a sudden be flooded with new ideas and new ways and new avenues and just to explore with a different enthusiasm. I always come back with some ideas how to continue whenever I've been away.
The perspective change.
Totally.
I feel like you can't get anywhere else. And I'm going to be going to the Netherlands in April because I've always wanted to go to the Anne Frank house. But I'm leaving it open. I don't want to book all this stuff. I just want to look around and hang out and follow where the path takes me. That
is harder to do, I think, as we get older. But it's always like it's a good thing to remember, I can do this. I can see what happens.
It's courageous. Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. And, my clients will say, but that's scary. And I'm like,
exactly.
Yes, it is. It is scary.
But it's actually, it's scary, but it's really not. It feels scary. It's not actually.
Well, scary and exhilarating, right? Usually you don't get excitement without some fear.
Without some unknown. Yeah.
Some unknown. Some unknown, yeah.
Which, anything can happen. And a lot of times it's a great thing that can happen. You speak to strangers. It's, you meet people the way, remember that first trip, I went for 9 weeks by myself without internet. How did I do that?
Oh my
Meeting
goodness.
people along the way was great.
That's a skill. I mean, not everybody is up for that.
That's true.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you, Alice, and all of your books and what you're up to?
Okay, well, several places. I do have a newsletter, and the newsletter is the Feiring line. Spelled Feiring.
Yes.
And there will be a button for all of my books.
Okay.
And, signing up for the newsletter if wanted to deepen their wine knowledge. There is Instagram at Alice Point Feiring, or Google Alice Red-Haired Wine Writer, and you'll find more than you ever thought you would want to know about me.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. It's been such a pleasure being able to speak with you. I really, really enjoyed this book. And, I read people's books before I interview them, most of the authors. And some are more fun than others. And this was just so delightful. So,
thank you. I
thank
really appreciate that.
And good luck in your adventures. And it sounds like there's some thrills to be had coming up.
I hope so. I definitely hope so. Not ready to pack it in yet.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.